Hello. Hello, everyone. Very warm welcome to the day 2 of International ESG Summit 2022. And I'm pretty excited about today's sessions. Yesterday, we had a very interesting set of panels and discussions, debates, and so on. And today, we are moving into the exact specifics of what we were trying to focus on as part of this summit, as part one. And that is the development of sustainable food systems and how it connects with the sustainability and regenerative practices. And we have a very accomplished set of panelists and speakers today with us. And I'm very pleased to welcome them all to the session. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Kavita Prakashmani, who is the founder and CEO of Mandai Nature and has held very senior positions with organizations like WWF in the past. We have Mr. Patanjali Jha, who is ex-principal secretary of income tax in India and also has been a farmer. He claims himself to be a natural farmer and has been practicing this for last 15-20 years. And also he is on the advisory board of Gaia, the Earth Foundation. We have Ms. Maria Lettini, who is who is the executive director from FAIR Initiative, joining us from UK, London. By the way, I wanted to mention that we have the panel, which is covering almost all time zones. We have Kavita joining us from Singapore, Mr. Jha joining us from India, Maria joining us from London, and Sloan joining us from US. And she is from the initiative called Invest Vegan. And that is a very interesting initiative, and how it connects with the sustainable food systems and regeneration is what we will discover as we move forward in the panel. So a very warm welcome to all of you once again. So without further ado, I would like to just jump straight into the discussion here, because regeneration as a concept has not been very well understood. And even now, when we talk to people who are in the sustainable food system chain itself, even they feel that regeneration is something that they do not understand as clearly well. So maybe we should start with the definition of regeneration itself. And I would like us to begin with Mr. Jha, since you're the first person on my left. So I will start with you, and then we can move across the panel.
Sure. So why regeneration, and especially the one which I practice and which I feel is the answer for Code Red for Humanity. I draw my strength also from Dr. Ratan Lal. He would be easily one of the most credible scientists the world has known, recipient of World Food Prize, equivalent of Nobel Prize in Agriculture. He says that if you can increase the carbon content in the soil by 2%, you can neutralize all greenhouse gases, all. So I'm a humble farmer, natural farmer for the past 2 decades of no-till. No-till of a special kind, which does enormous amount of carbon sequestration. So I'm very happy that let the world do all kinds of sustainable practices, which they are doing, which they are making the announcement. The effect of that is yet to be seen, but some serious and sincere efforts are being made in that direction. But perhaps we have lost the focus. The key focus is the regenerative farming, no-till farming, which can be truly, the answer to the global warming. It's a simple fact. I understand, being a farmer, the simplicity is our core. And I have seen the results. We have farms, about 500 such farms. So basically, we follow Fukuoka. He was a Zen master. And so the no-till drew from there. And according to the Indian conditions, which is more of sunlight, more of people, more of arable land, the second largest arable land on earth after the US. And so it is one practice which we molded as per Indian conditions, which is basically, I put it simply as no-till, permanent, multi-layer food forest. So I would pass on this thing. So I would like to stick to this as the most important way to achieve this region, because the world cannot now, the certain extinction of mass extinction of human beings cannot be saved by sustainable measures. It has to be regenerative. We need to understand that. And this is one simple measure which can bring, along with all other measures which the world is taking, this perhaps is the single most important measure which can still save us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cha. Ms. Kavita, I'll take this question to you now, and please help us understand regeneration as per because you have been in this space for a very long time, and you have also been connecting that with conservation. So would like to understand from you how it links with the existence, as he was mentioning, the mass extinction which is happening for the human race, which is very much evident, plus also how it connects with the ESG space put together.
Absolutely, Gayatri, and thank you for having us. I'll let me start with the ESG question first, and then make the parallel to where we are with the natural environment. So, if you take a step back and look at ESG as an environmental social governance issues that we're expecting companies to be taking on over the last couple of decades, at least since I've been working in corporate responsibility space, we've really moved across 5 stages. And I'm going to use this from the book that John Elkington wrote called The Green Swans, if you've all read that. And so people who remember, we started from everyone saying do no harm, compliance, so that you're really just saying, I'll do the minimum as a company to meet the law, the regulation that we have. And in fact, there was a rejection phase where everyone said it's not the company's responsibility to take care of environmental and social issues. But we went from a rejection phase to a responsibility phase where companies said, okay, I get it. A lot of these environmental and social issues are happening due to my company, whether it's labor issues in factories, or it's deforestation due to commodities, or it's emissions due to factories. So we went from rejection to responsibility, and then we went to replication, which was suddenly saying, okay, let's all come together, and if we can co-create some of these pre-competitive partnerships. So we had, Renewable Energy 100, which are 100 companies committing to renewable energy and working together. Or you had, the fashion industry coming together on labor issues, or you had, the agriculture. One of the programs I ran was Grow Asia, which looked at smallholder farmer sustainability in Southeast Asia for the World Economic Forum. So we went into a replication. We know a model, and let's do it over and over again. From there, where we are right now is about resilience. So we're starting to see, climate change is having a big impact on, say, the supply chain, or we're not getting good outcomes because our employees aren't happy and there's a revolt at the factory. So the resilience of your company depends on you actually doing certain things in a certain way to ensure that you can, whether it's an environmental disaster or a social change or a revolution or a war, as we're seeing right now, you can be resilient against that. But the last phase, which is what we really want to talk about, is regeneration. And this is where a lot of thought is being given into saying, how do I as a company not just take from nature or take from people, but actually put back, so that there is a long-term regeneration of those assets. We're already using 1.6 planets worth of resources. So by August in a year, we've used up all the resources, and then we're living beyond the planetary boundaries and the ability of the planet to sustain us. If we really want to survive and have an economic growth and a quality of living, we have to then recreate some of those resources so that we can live the rest of the 5 months of the year. And that's the regeneration. What does it mean if I now take, like, as Mandai Nature, we're a nature conservation organization. And as Mr. Chow was saying, 1 million species are at risk right now. We lose about 1% of our tropical forests every year. Our water systems are polluted. We have tons of plastic going into the ocean every year. We have dead zones due to overuse of pesticides. Nature is literally falling apart around us. And then on top of that, we have climate change. And 30% of climate solutions lie with nature. If we are just saying, I will stop deforestation now, it's not good enough. We have to bring back a lot of our forests. We have to bring back clean oceans and rivers. We have to let the rivers reach the ocean in the first place. They're disappearing off the back of a lot of the overpollution and overuse that we have. So all of these ecosystems are at the brink of collapse. And I'll take one of the biggest ones. If you take the Amazon rainforest right now, which is the lungs of the planet, we're at a tipping point. If we destroy any more of the Amazon rainforest, it will cease to be a rainforest. It will become a mixed land. It will become a savanna. That will change completely the hydrological system that we all depend on for agriculture in Latin America. It will be a disaster. And that tipping point is imminent. So this is no longer about protection. It is really about saying we need to regenerate and invest in these ecosystems, in the people, in the ESG systems that is no longer about do no harm, but actually about a positive impact. So let me leave it there and see what comes back.
That was a very brilliant explanation, Kavita. Thank you for that. And I will take it to you, Maria, now. So how would you like to add on to the definitions that we have just, I got the two iterations from Mr. Jha and Kavita both. So how would you like to define that from your perspective, and what kind of linkages do you see with ESG?
Great, thanks so much. Well, again, just to maybe help contextualize my response, right? FAIR is an institutional investor network. So we focus specifically on research and practical tools for institutional investors, right? And we look at global protein supply chains. So much of what I will say will, be linked directly to agriculture and animal agriculture. And the risks and opportunities there. And obviously biodiversity, climate, all of those risks are really important to investors because there's a real realization across environmental and social factors that these risks are playing out in the short, medium, and long term, right? They're going to affect portfolio value, both from a company bottom-up perspective as well as from a portfolio perspective. And particularly when we see what's happened as a result of the crisis that we've been going through now with Ukraine, while being a geopolitical crisis, it's obviously affecting a lot of the inputs that go into our agricultural system. And so where we see what's happened to commodity prices on the back of fertilizer prices and what that means to the underlying food basket for not only developed countries, but also for developing countries. And so that is essentially why investors care about these issues. I mean, we know that 23% of shared land areas have seen a reduction in productivity due to land degradation, and 75% share of global food crop types are relying on animal population. And couple this with the sheer increase that we've seen in food production since the Green Revolution in the 50s and 60s, there's a lot of reliance on our land to produce food. And the way that we've been producing it, we know, has been taking away from our natural resources and not giving back. So that's why regeneration is absolutely essential. And if you look at the numbers that come out from the IPCC, and we see how soil degradation is actually affecting the entire world, including, grasslands and some of the most vulnerable areas, as Kavita mentioned, like the Amazon, they're actually putting they're actually threatening a number of the world's people who are actually dependent on these areas for their livelihoods. In many countries, over 60% of the workforce is dependent on agriculture, animal agriculture, or land. So obviously, as we see the degradation of these land areas, if we're not regenerating them, we're not only going to not be able to have the food that we require, we're not going to be able to support the livelihoods and the underlying GDP of many of the countries the world over. So, when we think about the UN FAO study that, I think hit particularly the investment community quite hard, saying that, we only have 60 harvests left. That really brought the community together to say, okay, what's going in? What are the inputs into this system? What are the outputs into the system? And how is that going to affect asset classes in our portfolios?
Very interesting. And I really appreciate the kind of perspective that you are building in. And that's the beauty of this panel, that we have a very diverse panel, because we have a perspective of somebody who's been, taking lead in conservation, somebody from the investor network, somebody from investing into vegan systems, and we have a natural farmer as well. So we are getting a 360-degree view when it comes to regeneration and how its linkages are important for the investment community in specific. So Sloan, coming to you now, how would you define this and how does it connect with the work that you do?
Oh yeah, I mean, first off, I just got to say, what a privilege to start my morning talking about this with all you guys. I'm fangirling hard with some of the perspectives that have been shared. In particular, I really loved how Kavita established the link between regeneration and resilience, right? And I think, like, stepping back, right? We're an asset manager, and I sort of started Invest Vegan in a rage almost, because I felt that regeneration was what clients wanted. ESG was all that the investment industry could give them. And what we really need to do is commit to kind of a multidimensional search for better here, right? Because just to kind of establish a comparison with the way things are done normally, right? It's common in these sorts of conversations to hear people talk about, we need frameworks for this, frameworks for that, all sorts of ways of evaluating these things objectively. But in the traditional investment world, people are just able to say, I'm looking for intrinsic value, right? And the way that they do that, it has to be relatively serious. But if you're an active manager, you have a degree of discretion to go and say, look, I know how to, figure out what intrinsic value is, and that's what you pay me for. The whole conversation about what sustainable investing means for people has been sort of tortured by like an over-reliance on certain metrics, in particular carbon emissions, and a failure to consider broader systems level trends, right? Like, so the sort of stuff that FAIR does, where they're sitting there and saying, like, okay, cool, McDonald's, you've got a bunch of women on your board and you've cut your carbon emissions by a bunch, but you also, are a gigantic site of animal cruelty, right? Okay, meat packers, et cetera. So I think that what we need to do is translate, we can identify that we have, as a society, experienced a colossal failure of the imagination with regard to how to do investing. And, my work specifically is in translating that client intent, where, like, I have, retirees who call up, just randomly on the phone and are like, hey, I need, I want something to do with this that doesn't harm the world, that helps, the stuff around me, and makes a positive contribution. But at the same time, like, accesses whatever returns are out there and serves my needs as well. And so, like, I think that we've allowed our conception of what investing is to be effectively colonized by a couple of large indexes that are made, in kind of non-transparent, or they're transparent but non-intuitive processes that don't necessarily have much to do with the direction that we want to push the world in, right? And, like, regardless of that, right, tons and tons of people are always stuck comparing, the new regenerative thing that they're doing with this old, system that was literally set up by white guys in bow ties in a Midtown Manhattan office building. And, like, so I think the way that I think about my project here is challenging, the idea of what investing is, and finding ways for people to have incredibly strict ethical standards, have incredibly strict regenerative intention, and translate that as much as possible into, using the tools of long-term shareholding to manifest, positive change. And one really good example of that is, our largest shareholding is a company called Farmer Mac, which is a really interesting agricultural bank here in the U.S. That is sort of set up by federal charter to lend to a mix of rural agricultural, rural electric cooperatives and, U.S. as the USDA defines it, like small farmers. And I think that through that shareholding, we have an opportunity to basically, over a 10-year period, push them to be their best self, right? This is a lender that has unparalleled access into a pocket of rural America that is impossible to reach. There is a crazy amount of institutional demand for catalytic capital, and value-added lending, efforts that reach these pockets. And, we just don't have the musculature in place for the financial system to value them. So I think that it's on us as investors, like me specifically, and really everyone, I would say, to think creatively and expansively about how we can, translate the tools that are in front of us, the opportunities that are in front of us, into, the most positive version of itself, right? That's what active ownership ought to be. And to me, that's what, regenerative asset management really is.
Okay, that was quite an interesting perspective that you brought in. And I would love to build upon that, Kavita, and take this question to you, that when we talk about systems thinking approach to regeneration, how would you like to, explain that, especially because we are talking about an integrated approach towards this entire, domain of ESG, and regeneration is the new definition of, I would say, sustainability, because we have already crossed that threshold where sustaining something would have helped us. This is the time that we have to repair, regenerate, and get into the thriving ecosystem that will help sustain life on this planet further. So in terms of, because this is a new jargon you might have heard, systems thinking approach. So how would you want to put that into perspective and, build on
thanks,
what
Gayatri. Yeah, I was actually just thinking that, we need to start talking about it in terms of systems. So it's a perfect segue from what Sloan was saying. And I think this is the point, right? I mean, what we have been doing so far is literally taking pieces of, the puzzle from here and there and acting on it. So, if you were looking at agriculture, you'll be like, okay, let's do organic, which has less pesticides in it, or let's do less water intensive crops in that, but we're not looking at the whole system within which it operates. And I've done years of work on agriculture as well. And so even when you look at smallholder farmers, which is the predominance that we have in the developing world, and you work with them, we look at the farm. And even within the farm, we don't look holistically. So there's the system of agriculture within the farm that you can improve, from soil quality to crop rotation to no-till to agroforestry within the farm. So that in itself is a system that needs to regenerate, so that there's carbon capture, there is soil fertility improvement and things like that. But the farm sits within another system. It sits within a landscape. And how does it interact with those things? If there's a forest next to it, we don't want deforestation, right? That's one of the biggest things we're looking at. If there's wildlife in that forest, that wildlife actually wants to cut across the forest, across the farm, because the forest extends on the other side. So now you have a lot of like tigers that are walking across farmlands, or leopards walking across farmlands in India. Or you have birds that are going and eating rice off the farm in a lot of the rice growing areas that we have in the world. But then that landscape is also part of multi-use, right? You have protection, you have restoration, you have, so, we need to start looking at, and these are just natural systems that we have. If you start looking at the corporate world and the industries, we have industrial sectors. How do we make those sectors more sustainable is important. So if you're looking at, say, the transport sector, with this new advent of electric vehicles, we're now having to change the entire ecosystem within which the electric vehicles operate. The fuel they use, is that off-grid? Is it green hydrogen? Is it renewable energy that is, or fossil fuel based? How do you charge them? How do you produce them? What's the end of life? Is there batteries that are long enough? So, you start looking, you have to then create a system around it that supports the regeneration rather than these singular impacts that we've had. And I think, so you can pick any example. I mean, take food, we've looked at production, you can look at it from the consumption side. This whole Beyond Meat, plant-based diet is then regenerative in its own way, because it's reducing the amount of carbon-based, meat consumption that we have, which, it has a place, but because we need protein. So again, I would just say, like, we have to now start looking collectively within that systems, living within our planetary boundaries, but protecting and restoring the natural environment and supporting the growth the health, well-being of people and other species.
Great. I was actually about to come to that point, and Mr. Jha was going to turn this question towards you. Since we are talking about systems approach and health and well-being being such an important and integral component of this whole ecosystem, which is not generally connected when we talk about regeneration or forestry or conservation, we think that health and well-being for human beings is a different topic. So you have done some extensive work and you have several testimonies from people who have been benefited from this kind of work. So would love to hear your thoughts on some of the live examples on this front.
Yeah, so I would like to start from where Kavita left. And since I'm a purist in my attitude and in my conviction, so I would basically, this is what I've been telling my fellow farmers and some of the corporate head, perhaps one of the best corporates definitely in our country, arguably in the world. The CEO of that is listening to me. So first, let me explain what we are doing and how that can be an answer, the most effective answer to the current problems that we are facing. I'm an extremely focused man. So we have a farm next to Narmada Ji. This is an ancient river system in India, and exactly on the banks of the river, where the most of the land, the excavation of the sands, sand mining, illegal mining, they had rendered every inch of soil gone. So about 2 decades back, we started this. And we started with the trees, we made mistakes, but now we have arrived at a regenerative form of agriculture, which from the year 1 reduces the temperature, which is no till, no poison, no fertilizer, including that of the organic fertilizer. None of it is needed. Nature is extraordinarily brilliant. We need to understand. This is what we did in the past 2 decades. So I'm talking of the solutions. This is, you see, agriculture is a double whammy. When you till the soil, even if you are doing practicing an organic farming, is not going to help your cause, because what is trapped inside the soil, you're releasing the carbon, the nitrous oxide, the methane, all these gases, they remain into the atmosphere for anywhere between 50 to 100, 120 years. So this is what we are facing, the Western world, whatever at the cost of their development. The problem of equity is, so all this remain into the atmosphere for so long. As against that, when you don't till, so you absorb the carbon into the soil. The more carbon you have, as Dr. Ratan Lal says, the merely a 2% increase can change and reverse all greenhouse gases. So let's focus on this, how the corporate can be brought into this, and what we figured out for the Indian context, where we have so much of young population, is, utilize the vertical space, which hitherto has been unutilized. So we grow 2 plants together. One goes up, say a moringa. The world now is aware of moringa. It's a wonder food, they call. And we were aware of this for a long, long time. And on our farm, it has grown to a height of 70 feet, 80 feet. The citrus of a kind which, again, is what you said about health, soil health. So some good 35 people have been cured of their cancer, and people come to us only in the Western world has taken us for a big ride. I am very forthright in my stating this, because it's such a huge business, so they would not let that go. The solutions for such severe, so-called health issues of cancer they are talking of in India, I can talk about. 10% of Indians would get cancer in their lifetime, is what WHO says. 13 crore, one person gets cancer. Everybody in the family gets involved in the struggle against the cancer. 54 crore people in a country of 130 crore would be struggling against cancer. What kind of a country are we going to live in? If your body is alkaline, you would never get cancer. Mark it. This is a science. And when a turmeric, a moringa, a lemon peel to vetiver root. These are very, very important areas. which the humble grass vetiver can purify river system. There is one river in Indonesia, Citarum River, the largest river of Indonesia, which now they are doing, among other measures, the biggest measure is they are planting vetiver by the sides of the river. It's corruption-free, very cheap, sustainable. It has a lifespan of 100 years, and it does enormous amount of carbon sink. 4 vetiver is equal to 1 poplar tree for all functions of tree. So we, together with friends, we started gifting vetiver to Eco Task Force of the Indian Army at 8 different locations. It's very pertinent to understand these solutions because there's so little has been done that you start from anywhere and then nature would surprise you. This fact of the matter is, at 8 very difficult locations, including Marathwada, Gangaji, then the Himalayan system. Today, the 1.75 crore vetiver slips which we gifted has become 50 crore, is doing 3,000 tons of carbon sequestration. Every year it will multiply by 10. So in the next 2 years, it will be achieving 3 lakh tons. No corporate, no government would have achieved anything so quickly. Hats off to Indian Army, hats off to Mother Nature. So the solutions are still simple, but let's focus. And whatever has a credence, whatever has a, and this you save the double whammy, or you don't release the agriculture is responsible for greenhouse gases to the least estimate is 30%. So you stop that, and instead you take the carbon inside the soil with the help of the vetiver, the multi-layer. I can in a minute I can explain. Inside the soil, black turmeric. It's extraordinary to cure cancer. Currently, it is in the endangered species in India because of the overexploitation. We all know till farmers are growing them. In no certain time, I mean, in the next 2 to 3 years, 4 years, perhaps 5 years, we potentially can reach to the world and can cure enormous number of cancer patients, prevent them also, because this is one of the best anti-tumor herb. Inside the soil is that, then the moringa and the lemon together, moringa goes up, lemon remains below, and the tiny leaves of the moringa allows the sunlight to filter, and both the trees grow. So suddenly you have a 100% increase in the productivity. Then surrounded by vetiver. Vetiver holds the topsoil, holds the moisture, and purifies water and recharges the groundwater. Now you see this simple model is doing carbon sink, bring down the temperature on our farm. As Kavita was mentioning, outside our farm, the temperature now in summer goes to 50 degrees, where birds die because it stays at 50 degrees. On our farm, the temperature is now 36. It never goes past 36 degrees. What else is heaven? A time will come when human beings, the way we have elephant corridor that you create a passage for the elephant, there would be a time not very distant in future when you would have to create a human corridor for us to survive. I'm speaking to some corporate head, a simple solution. Please create a separate category as forest no-till produce. I emphasize on no-till, which is beyond organic, which is curative. In our scriptures, it is mentioned, food is medicine. It is so right. There are 200 odd people who have been cured with these things. We take no money from anyone who's suffering in life. And if you produce this and convince people through advertisement that by buying produce from these, you would be encouraging more and more farmers to be creating food forests. Suddenly, several lakhs of hectares of land can be converted into food forest. And mind you, this is extremely remunerative because it has very high productivity. Combine it with the compressed biogas. This is what we say, because our kind of farm, there is a criticism of this in the West, that it is at the cost of the food grains. We are not talking of the food grains now. We have a company in the country, which is Praj Industries. They are the #1 company in the world in its research. So the chairman of that is known to us. So through the 2G now is the latest, which is the first company is going to come. The biomass can be producing the clean energy, and the residue is an organic fertilizer. Perfect circular economy. So my this is what I keep appealing: create no-till multi-layer food forests capable of doing enormous amount of carbon sink, as much as 1 lakh kg per annum per acre. So the current ESG is so confusing and so complicated that a simple, nature-based solution of supporting this and not creating hindrance is the biggest thing that you can do, Gayatri, if you can convince the,
Sure.
the right.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jha. That was quite interesting and very elaborate response to the example that I was trying to build on the health and well-being side. I would like to come to you, Maria, now, just as you heard, very elaborate response to this question. So there is no doubt that regeneration is the way forward, but still we see that is not adopted as much and not even understood as much as it should be. So what kind of barriers do you think are there in the market or in the ecosystem that are preventing this adoption or preventing this to get mainstream?
Well, I think, to be honest, the lack of incentive to change, right? I think when you speak to farmers around the world, they understand regenerative agriculture. It's a, means of production that goes back centuries. It's, quite frankly, we've moved to the production system, intensive system that we have today, based on a need that we had decades ago. And from our frame of reference, a need to find a place for surplus grain into animal agriculture. I think what's needed now, and there is excitement from the investment community, is to help turn back clocks. Find other means in which to produce more sustainable agriculture systems, more sustainable forestry systems, and this understanding. And I consider biodiversity as, the perfect systems approach, right? It forces people to think about unintended consequences of every system. So money needs to flow into this sector, but policy and regulation need to help facilitate that. So to incentivize and move towards more regenerative practices or technologies, right, to create environments by which new technologies and new startup firms can actually come to the market, for there to be seed capital and venture capital to help procure those new ideas and to make them available to farmers on the ground, right? And in some kind of subsidy model or low cost model, so that they can reintegrate those practices into their current systems. We know the margins that farmers are operating on right now, and it's not going to allow them the necessary capital expenditure to begin to change their operating systems. So that's what's needed, and governments play a big role here because the advantages, as we've just heard, are huge. And can solve a lot of the world's problems today. Again, both on the human health side, and I would add the reduction of the need for use of antibiotics on animal and agriculture into that as well. Lower zoonotic risk. We know that a lot of diseases come from how we're producing food today. So again, the benefits far outweigh the risks, but we do need capital to be moving in the right direction. And I think there's plenty sitting on the sidelines ready to jump in to transform the system.
And requesting, thanks, Maria. That was exactly, the pointers that we have been gaining. So education is one. There is not enough awareness probably in the right kind of communities, especially say investor communities. And that is all the more reason that we are having a conference like this, which is having a spin around this topic in specific. And second could be, as you rightly said, policies and regulations, but ultimately it all boils down to the capital inflows, right? And Sloan, you have been working in this space and I'm sure that you have had your own set of challenges in trying to make this work. And would love to understand from you, what are the challenges in getting the capital inflows into the whole set of regenerative sustainability or, the vegan food systems or anything of this sort, which is understood to be right, but still it is not getting enough attention?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, if you think about how flows into ESG started in the first place, right? It was retail investors by and large. And, before that, religious organizations and unions and trade groups. But really, when it started mainstreaming, the way that, you know, most of the large institutions that we'd think of today as stalwarts of the ESG movement, those were all built on retail investor dollars. And, you know, I think that unlike the, you know, the long-term investors like pensions and sovereign wealth funds and stuff like that, that, you know, I think we probably all agree should be crowding into this space because they naturally have the time horizon, the sophistication, the risk appetite to think on this sort of time scale. You know, an institution like that, which could write $1 billion check, has to run it by like a zillion people. And, you know, a lot of them are struggling to do stuff like get data, you know, that's organized at all, right? Or like, you know, figure out like what ESG, you know, or how to fulfill a net zero commitment that they've already made or something like that. And that consumes a lot of time. You know, these are not high bandwidth organizations, and they wind up outsourcing a lot of their investment decision-making to intermediaries that are, you know, quite frankly, kind of captured by a legacy hegemonic way of thinking that has dominated, you know, Wall Street and the financial system for forever, right? You know, so I think in one sense, the challenge is like, how do you get to a place where, you know, you can, you know, like, you know, Mr. Jha is talking about on his food forest, put the right plant in the right place so it gets the right thing, you know, instead of going and saying like, all right, well, you know, there's this global idea of what investing is, and it's the S&P 500 index. And if you, for one quarter, don't match the S&P 500 index, you know, heaven help you. I mean, like literally that happened, and there was a Barron's cover story, you know, about, you know, ESG failing its first test, you know, like 2 weeks ago, as a result of it. So, you know, I think that people are scared to change, especially with something as, you know, kind of scary and poorly understood as investing. You know, I think that people usually think that we have a well-established, you know, evidence-based investment profession on the whole. But one of the things I really love to remind people is that it's super young, and social notions of value and like our understanding of value is socially constructed, right? 100 years ago, there was not a generally accepted understanding that basic accounting information on financial statements had any underlying relationship to stock prices. Part of that's because the information was costly to acquire and hard to parse and so on. But, you know, for something as basic as like, you know, having a bunch of cash on the balance sheet translating to the value of shares being worthwhile, that took a long time to become popularized, right? We're probably in that moment where, you know, like sometime in the 1940s, a bunch of weird people, you know, started meeting for lunch at, you know, a couple of restaurants around Midtown Manhattan, and like swapping information that became like the Financial Analyst Journal, et cetera. We're probably in that moment for sustainable investing, right? And it sucks because we need this urgently, right? There are trillions of dollars of capital on the sidelines, controlled by people who want to invest in catalytic projects, but don't have the sort of career risk worked out of doing it, right? And to have the career risk worked out of doing it, you know, we just need more familiarity, more frameworks, and really more people doing stuff like this. Unfortunately, in order to start, you know, an asset manager that's, you know, distinctive to cutting against the grain, you wind up just being super weird. And in an industry that has so much conformist pressure, you know, I think it just takes a lot to do that. And I think I'd say that's the biggest challenge is like, you know, continuing to commit to that process.
I think, Sloan, isn't that the biggest problem, the short-termism of all of the financial investment that we make? A lot of these system change, especially on the environmental conservation side and the agriculture food side, take time, at least 3 to 5 years. And we do need more patient capital impact investment that is going into this. And I can just take an example from the climate finance right now, which everyone's pinning all their hopes on. And even there, where we're now saying, you know, invest in nature-based climate, because that's the system which brings climate, nature, and people together, and you can truly benefit from that, is just getting turned into like, I'll buy the carbon credit when it's available, rather than I'll invest in the project development that gets us to the carbon credit when it's available. So we're really finding that, the capital market isn't still, putting its money where the whole agenda is going, and we're still depending on a lot of philanthropic money, even if it's blended finance at best, to take on all of these risks. All those risks are being left to, NGOs or farmers. So we really do need to get that investment side sorted. And then, and I know this is what you're saying.
To play the system, right? Like at this point, you can play the system, get carbon credits for yourself to be producing more while you have a small regenerative sort of agriculture system within your bigger organization. So I think there's a lot for the market to have to work out here, right? To make sure we're moving in the right direction.
I completely endorse that, Kavita, because we are facing that ourselves. I mean, our organization is actually, as part of Mission Prakriti, we are into regeneration, and we are trying to exactly address this problem, despite having, and that was my next question for you, by the way, that what kind of market incentives can be created that will help us push this agenda forward. And just building on what you just said, this is a personal experience that we have seen that despite having market-based incentives like carbon credits, which is pretty much a visible incentive, and it is making a lot of sense because every organization does have their carbon emission targets. So it does make sense for them to actually put aside certain capital to ward off that in the future, unless they really feel that this is some magical thing will happen and this will somewhere disappear. That's the only reason why they should not take this seriously. Otherwise, this is pretty much a business case for them. So I would love to pose that question even then, because this is what the situation is. But what do you think could be other market-based incentives that can be pushed forward?
So it's a really good one, and I think we're all struggling with it. So I think 2 or 3 things are happening. First, we are seeing exchanges being set up that are selling carbon credits, and we're trying to get those exchanges to actually, have co-benefits to nature and people, valued at a higher price, so that you can see the price of carbon, which is, hopefully going to go up from like $5, and it's somewhere around 10, 12 right now, but we're hoping it'll move to 20, 25 and then move on, so that it actually pays for the cost of producing that carbon credit in the reality of the situation, because we, always tend to not internalize the cost of these things. So that's one of like, how do you value the additionality so that you are getting the right price for that? But of course, there's a whole debate of saying whether you can trivialize all aspects of environment by putting a monetary value on it. But I think that the second part of that is really about saying, how do we get these win-wins which don't accrue otherwise? A lot of the productivity from farmers will be based on better production systems that have net, environmental and social things. So is that a way of getting in? But these are all workarounds to find the right way of getting to the investors that value it. But I think till we get the right price of carbon, in this case, ready, in the true carbon credit. So even if you're just buying a carbon credit, you're actually paying for that, and you internalize the risk, because if it is nature-based and if it is agroforestry-based, there's numerous risks. There's regulatory risk, there's natural risk, fires, floods, earthquakes. There's a failure of crop risk. There's so many risks that that end up being taken, that we then really need to look at how do we monetize those risks or offset those risks as well. So the system isn't quite there yet, but we're really trying to push in terms of saying, how do you create that value equation?
Okay.
One point, Kavita, of course, I mean, this is a very valid point of the kind of farming we are doing. This is the only climate change resilient model, because now industrial commercial farming, you're so right, with the vagaries of nature, prolonged drought and very intense rains in very short period of time, can simply would destroy everything, even if it is no-till, which the West is catching up with that, and it's a very heartening thing. There's a significant number of people who are now practicing no-till farming.
And Mr. Jha, I'd love to hear your point, because I think the problem is that the inherent risk of agriculture
let me complete. Yeah, very true. Because I'm a practicing farmer, so I know. And unfortunately, I could not show you the pictures. Otherwise, I would have shown you after the Amphan. We have two farms, and it was incessant rain for a good 1 week. Everything was inundated, including our farm, no-till farm of 7 years there back home. Within 48 hours, each bit of that inundation was absorbed. That is because we have not seen the likes of this in the world. This regenerative farming is so resilient to the climate change. Actually, all it requires, a farmer requires, is the simplification of procedures, and nature-based solutions for carbon should be rated way higher than what
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is being done.
absolutely.
One, two, the procedures should be made simpler, because still they are taking everyone for a spin.
And
That
and
how
there is
I can show 1 lakh kg of carbon being sequestered on our farm, and from the year 140,000, mind you, this vetiver is an amazing grass.
Yeah.
So, in case we can be, demonstrating that, there should be a very simpler way of compensation or rewarding, whichever way you want to term it. That should happen. So that those removal of the obstacles and the exchanges is something which is causing a great deterrence currently.
so
And
I think
prevent
that's a
eventually,
key point. I actually think that's a key point, right? Because we need to mitigate the damage that we've already done, but we see this coming. Like, we know this is a preventative measure that we can put in place that will make all of our agricultural practices resilient, that underpins entire economies. And I think that just needs to be reiterated, right? It's part of our responsibility as citizens, as part of government's responsibility, and it actually will save money and lives, right? So it seems, ridiculous to not move in a direction that actually prevents disasters from happening. And we've seen the natural degradation already. So it's, I think that needs to be reiterated from the top.
great. This is quite an interesting, discussion, and I know that we don't have all definite answers as of now, given the phase of development we are in, and we are still hoping for this community to be more sensitized, and that's all the more reason that we are having this conference, so that all the audiences, investment professionals, and the ESG ecosystem, and the who's who of the decision makers, they have to take note of what is the right way to move forward and why it is so urgent. So there is no point understanding the importance of it when we have already crossed the threshold, when there is no looking back, because regeneration comes with its own timelines. There is a limit attached to it. So with that, I would like to thank you all. But before that, before we leave you all, there are a couple of questions from the audiences. I'll take a couple of them. The first is from somebody from Yale University. We are conducting solution summits, creating new norms of sustainability. Business schools are getting on board. How can we convene asset managers? What are their trade or industry associations? Okay, I don't know. That's not a question for this panel, I guess. Okay, one more question that we have. Hi, since we often see carbon credits being misused, it is time to reduce the number of climate credits available for purchase through any number of methods, such as by reducing the credits a project may be awarded, or limiting them based on how long-term the positive impact of the project is for, or by limiting the number of credits any project can purchase, especially those with known harmful impacts. Kavita, would you like to take that? Or Mr. Jha?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very valid point. Anything which is sustainable, which is this thing, that's why I limit myself to the food forest, no-till forest, multi-layered food forest. This keeps on increasing, and from the year one, it does enormous amount of carbon. Remove the the procedural problems. We will rock. I mean, try to sell them better. This is something which is curative, which is higher in productivity, mind you. So, and from the year one, the productivity is higher by a minimum of 100%. It's just the mindset that you need to change. And combine it with the compressed biogas, clean gas, perfect circular economy. I understand this, and I feel that this is the answer. remove all the obstacles which comes in the way if you want to survive?
I think on this one, there's a lot of work been going on into saying what are the core carbon principles and how do you measure them? There are obviously a number of key issues like leakage, permanence, baselining, additionality, and we can describe them on. And the thinking here is of making sure that you have systems in place that put better baselines, that look at jurisdictions. So the system approach versus the project approach, that you discount by a certain amount for future risk, depending on where it is, and they have good comparative studies that then reduce the number of credits you can do. So this is now going into a real global dialogue with the Integrity Council for Voluntary Carbon Markets and the Voluntary Carbon Markets Initiative to take some of these on so that we rightly have the right amount of credits with the right discount being put to it coming out of projects. But once we have that, we do want those credits to be one of the singular ways currently of monetizing the good impacts that we can have on nature and people through these projects. So you want them to get the right benefit from the carbon market in terms of the value of creation of the win-wins for climate, nature, and people with all the rights. So I think we need to find the right balance where we get the right measurement and then we get the right valuation.
I would also add that, like, to some degree, yes, we want to make sure that when people say that they're giving you a carbon credit, they're giving you something meaningful, right? But at the same time, like, the carbon credit market is a way for people in wealthy countries to buy things from people in less wealthy countries to fund a variety of projects. And that doesn't happen all that often, right? Like, you don't often get, significant cross-border trade between, like, the United States and Burkina Faso, right? And on top of that, there is, if you look at just the regulated carbon market versus the voluntary offset market, you see a price disparity of, like, 6x, where you could get, the regulatory carbon might be 100, whatever per whatever. I forget how they're pricing it, and the voluntary market is like 15. From an investment standpoint, I can 6 to 1. Kind of over offset something and be pretty confident that I've done something pretty good. And I think that, as long as we are open and accountable about the projects that we're doing, and, like, obviously, if somebody's out there, hyping a project that, has obvious negative harm, hopefully people crack down on that. But at the same time, like, it's important that people are permitted to make offsets that don't work out all the way. And it's important that, like, we are able to try as many things as possible. Because, in some places it's going to be, a fuel switching offset. In some places it's going to be, funding one, and like, who am I necessarily to say that we need to shut down this mechanism of funding, to only things that I decide are okay. Like, why not allow people to, express some creativity there?
Very well said. There's one more question, and after that we will just close this. Curious to hear panelists' views on the country level plans, nationally determined contributions, NDCs that we call. So NDCs, I'm sure that that's a similar term in other countries as well, towards the Paris Agreement goals. Certainly not all countries have such plans certified. And even within those, a smaller roster of countries that seem to have strong plans, are there better ways to monitor the country level performance on such NDCs or goals other than relying on climate action tracker or UN findings? What does one make of the green or ESG bond market? That's a very good question. Thank you, Mr. Anand Rajgopal. Yeah.
I don't know how much time we have, because that's a really intense question. So I won't touch on the second half, but very quickly on the NDC. The NDCs are definitely being tracked. And there are many trackers, of course, there's a UN, but the NGOs track it as well. And there's a whole coalition around, strengthening the NDCs. Not all the NDCs have plans of delivery yet. And I think that's where a lot of work is going on to saying how will the countries actually deliver against those NDCs, and how will they ratchet up those NDCs, because the developing countries currently don't have set them as high as some of the developed ones. But on the other hand, what we do have is we can get into the Article 6 discussion. We have an Article 6 that allows a better measurement and a trade of carbon credits between countries. And it also has corresponding adjustments so that it's very clear who's selling carbon credits to whom, and so we're not double counting them. And that then allows all the voluntary carbon market to work as well alongside the compliance one. So a lot of work is going around the NDCs that still is work in progress. We definitely can do more in terms of strengthening and actually holding them to account towards that as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kavita, and thank you all the panelists, Mr. Jha, Sloan, and Maria. I think she has left, but thank you so much for your very spirited participation. Really, thank you all for all the responses and for giving your time. And we look forward to continuing this conversation forward, because until and unless the tangible results are achieved, there is no point having these conversations. So we have to keep pushing until we are able to actually establish regenerative economies. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
This was a joy. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you soon.
I think over to you, Roseanne.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Audrey and fellow panelists. Good afternoon, everybody. Good evening, good morning. Thank you so much to Buzz on Earth and CFA Institute for facilitating this conference. And it's been absolutely amazing to connect with so many people from all over the world who all have the good of the planet, the good of animals, and the good of human beings, and the good of capital on their minds. And I do think by us engaging in a forum like this, we are really facilitating a transition towards a better and more sustainable planet. And so our theme today for this planet is really investing towards a sustainable food system. And you will see that all of us on this panel are really very passionate and optimistic about this topic. We do come from various ends of the spectrum regarding this. Some of us are investors and interested in investment opportunities. Then we have some people like Brett, who is on the food technology side. And we also have Sanjay, who is representing Guest Bank from India. So what we propose doing is introducing each of us and then really sharing with you our perspective on opportunities that we do see in looking towards how we can all play a role in transitioning the food system. And so firstly, for myself, I'm Roseanne Howarth from South Africa. I work in mainstream asset management, but for a long time, I've become aware that in our ESG processes, we are acutely aware of the risks associated with travel and energy. But enough, it's only really very recently that we are starting to recognize that the food system is a very big component of ESG. And for a long time, our industry has really overlooked this very important part of the ESG theme. And you will note that for this session, we do believe that now people are starting to recognize the importance of sustainable food system and the importance of food security. It is true that malnutrition is rife across the planet and arguably can be overcome by developing better food technology that will result in less waste and be more efficient. And of course, benefits of a better food system is not only there for humans, besides also being beneficial for the planet and for animals. It, of course, is also vitally important for the economy. GDP growth is impacted directly by malnutrition. So we can all agree that food security and a sustainable food system is very important. And hence, for all of us, we're very excited about the opportunity that we do have towards sharing information on this topic and really getting people to plug into the opportunities here. And yes, so now I'm going to be moving on to our panelists, which I really thank for participating in this session. personally, I do value your contribution immensely towards making the planet and the whole environment a better place. And so firstly, I'd like to introduce you all to Sanjay. So Sanjay is from the Yes Bank, and he is really an expert on food and agribusiness systems. He has done a lot of research over his very long career, and he's like focused a lot on the food system within India, but also more globally. And so I would really like Sanjay to tell us a bit about the research projects that he has looked into and what he has learned about the food system in India. Sanjay, can you share with us the journey that you've been on and tell us a little bit about the challenges that are being faced both in India and also globally, and what in your view needs to be done so that we can facilitate food security and a sustainable food system globally? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rosen, and thank you very much for the very kind introduction. And it is indeed a pleasure being on this panel, which is discussing food security and discussing sustainable sourcing of food. And on behalf of Yes Bank, I extend a very warm welcome and hearty greetings to all panelists present here on this eDIAS and all the participants who have logged in for this session. I'll focus on India's food security journey and what it has resulted in terms of the challenges that we're facing now, and what needs to be done by businesses, especially food businesses and agri businesses that are dependent on the agricultural system. This year, India is celebrating 75 years of independence. And from a food security perspective, over these 7 decades, India has had a phenomenal and transformative journey. Our country, from being a food deficit nation and a net importer of food grains during the early years of independence, during the early 50s, is today a global leader in production of a number of agricultural commodities. Commodities like cereals, like pulses, fruits, vegetables, and even animal products like milk, poultry, and fish. Food production, which is very important for food security, which is the key, food security is based on 3 key pillars. That is availability, access, and affordability. But first, food has to be available. And if we look at the Indian production system, the food grain production, which was just about 50 million metric tons in the 50s or early 50s, is now about 310 million metric tons. So the availability of food grains has grown up from about 140 kgs per person per year in the early 50s for about 360 million people then to close to about 190 kgs per person per year now. So it's a fantastic journey. Of course, a very important role played was the Green Revolution that happened during the initial periods, where there was an increase in crop productivity, primarily because of better access and better scientific use of various factors of production. By factors of production, I mean such as water, electricity, seeds, fertilizers, plant production chemicals, agricultural credit, and all such factors of production. So just to give you some examples, if you look at the fertilizer usage in India, the fertilizer consumption increased from just about 1 million metric tons in the 50s to about 30 million metric tons now. So it's a 30-fold increase. Likewise, the hybrid seed that is being used today, it was about 6 million hectares in the early 60s, and it's 80 million hectares now. So there's significant change in the way inputs are being used. Also, access to irrigation. So net irrigated area in the 50s was about 20 million hectares, and now it's about 70 million hectares. So what's happened is a lot of input heavy and input oriented productivity improvement has happened during the last 7 decades. While this entire ecosystem has really addressed the food security needs of the nation and been able to at least be food secure, this same utilization of inputs has resulted in something very different now. So as we are looking beyond food security now, looking beyond self-sufficiency and looking towards sustainable agricultural development and climate resilience. how has this development impacted, a sustainable food production and sustainable secure food production? One is the socioeconomic conditions at the farm level. You'll see that in India and most of the developing countries, there's very, very high fragmentation of landholdings. For instance, more than 85% of our farmers are small and marginal farmers with a landholding of below 2 hectares. They're very, very small. And they have low productivity, they have poor access to markets, and very high post-harvest loss. And all these factors are resulting in low farm income and unsustainable farm economics. So the first, E of the whole sustainability factor, that is economic sustainability, is a challenge. If a producer is not sustainable economically, then we'll have to be really worried. The second is because of the huge, investment in trying to promote use of fertilizers and pesticides or other inputs, we see unscientific and poorly informed use of water, fertilizers, and agrochemicals. Now, this is leading to a lot of degradation of soil and water resources. The third is the vulnerability of agriculture to climate change. So climate-related weather events, droughts, floods, and we see vagaries of monsoons, which are being frequent, intense, and almost regular in these regions of the world, especially India. So the context has changed, from being a ship-to-mouth country to a country which is the largest producer of grains. Now we are looking at how do we secure food in an economically viable, ecologically sound, and socially responsible manner. So the thought process is changing in the sense that we need to promote sustainable agriculture while combating the impact of climate change. And this will require innovative climate-resilient production technologies and tech-enabled digital food value chains. So while innovative climate-resilient technologies can improve productivity, tech-enabled access to data is going to drive the next green revolution. So the focus, we believe, or probably that is my view, is to ensure safe, affordable, and enough food by the food businesses focusing not just on promoting and popularizing productivity improvement technologies, but also popularizing digital technologies that can link farmers to markets, that can link farmers to access to affordable farm inputs. So that's where we are coming from. Rosanna, back to you.
Thank you so much, Sanjay. That is so exciting. It's wonderful to see how much more we can produce by working smartly, and great to know the focus on the smaller farmers. I think it's true that food can also be socially discriminatory, and we don't always think about that. We often think of the financial system that is socially discriminatory, but food, of course, can also be that. And it's very nice to see India really leading that way. Thank you. I'm next going to move to Claire, who I think would be on the same page as you for everything, but there's one more thing, and that is where Claire and I share a passion and bread potentially, yeah, right as well, and that is the other species with which we share the planet. Hello, Sunny, nice to see you. So for us, we do feel that there is another diagram that we could think links up with all of this, and that is like being very cognizant of our non-human species. And we do feel very positive about the momentum that we see in the plant-based space, the alternative protein production space, and we feel that potentially this has another set of benefits that would benefit also the species that we share the planet with. And very excited to see how we feel potentially people are becoming kinder in ways where they are not only considering other human beings' quality of life, but also recognizing that we must be considerate of animal quality of life. And so Claire, I see as really like a pathfinder for vegan investing. She's really led the way towards developing a platform that offers products for people that do feel that they would like to have an investment product that is aligned with their lifestyle, and hence being invested in opportunities that are free from animal cruelty. And of course, she is seeing like a whole host of opportunities there. And so I'm very excited, Claire, for you to share your journey with us. How do you see the opportunities in that space, the uptake for your products, and what is next on your plan? Thank you.
Okay, fine, sure. So yes, in terms of the journey is, as you mentioned, you know, a deep and abiding concern for animals, particularly animals exploited by humans. But in addition to that, the wildlife, which is being squeezed out. There's a slide which I sometimes put up when I'm doing a presentation, which shows 60% of the zoomass of land animals on Earth is actually livestock. 36% is humans, and only 4% is wild animals. And so it's important to note that the humans plus the animals that we use for our own, you know, purposes as a species are taking up, and, you know, almost 100%. We're leaving very little room for wildlife. So that's something which is, you know, very important to me, and not something that maybe a lot of people realize the impact that humans and their livestock are having on the natural world. So in terms of what I decided to do about that, I decided to spend the time, instead of spending time, you know, during my working life, looking at regular funds, traditional funds, and, you know, purely about performance and without any kind of ESG criteria, I made a big switch and created my own investment firms, which are embedding ESG criteria within the programs, and in particular, I added in the animal criteria, focusing on those, focusing on the animals used by humans, but with obviously the corollary to that, that if we are able to stop using animals, then we are going to free up an enormous amount of space for wildlife and relieve a lot of the pressure off the natural world. So what that's turned into in terms of opportunities, I suppose, is to an uptake of products is coming from sort of both sides of the equation, from the perspective of people that think the same way as I do and the kind of investment products that they need. You know, you kindly mentioned the fund that we already have launched, and the range of indexes which we have developed in order to put out more funds of this type. And the key thing about those is the imposition of some pretty stringent screens around the kind of companies that we will invest in and the kind of companies that we won't invest in. And we don't tend to just, you know, do it across a kind of scoring. We either, you know, say this is acceptable or not acceptable. And where we are adding this additionality over the standard ESG is in the animal exploitation screens, where we're not aware of anybody else that is applying these as thoroughly and as extensively as we are. Not just in the US, where we have the ETF out there, but also we now have indexes in all of the global developed markets as well. But those indexes are primarily removing exposures from the portfolio. And we also think it's important to be proactive and be dedicating some money towards the solutions. So we have two streams there, one in the listed markets and one in the unlisted markets, or VC. The one in the listed markets is investing in the small to mid-cap space, and particularly growth companies whose products are providing the solutions. They're providing vegetable or plant-based or alternative protein types of exposures, or alternative materials, cruelty-free cosmetics, those kind of things. And then in the VC space, we've also been investing in that area since 2017 as well. And that area of our business has expanded in the last few months with a new fund, which allows us to add, to make even bigger investments. So we're pretty happy overall with the uptake of interest. We actually see more interest in some ways than we're able to launch. We're a boutique investment management firm. We have put out a few products, and every fund product involves a certain amount of investment on our side in terms of legal costs, administration costs, setup costs, and the ability to fund the product. So while we are gathering assets. But we're very pleased that with the indexes and the products that we've created, we have established a track record, and we have shown that it is realistic to run your money in this way.
Thank you so much, Claire. That's so exciting. And for people on the call, if you're interested, you can look up Beyond Investing and also VEGN ETF listed on the New York Stock Exchange. I personally think with so many universities now saying students are insisting on meat-free canteens and so on, that we will definitely be seeing an uptick in interest in that themed investment space. So I think next we can take a break from the investing side, and I'm going to introduce you all to Brett Thompson, who in South Africa is quite a hero for all us vegans. And I believe there will be some of us that will be changing our tagline to Segan, which would mean that we would be vegans, but potentially consider eating cultivated meat. So of course, cultivated meat is a very big talking point right now, with a lot of action globally and a lot of governments really putting money towards that. It would also be even interesting later on to hear if Sanjay has an opinion about that. But of course, this is potentially really a solution for people that say, oh, look, I don't think I can live without my steak, but I am against animal cruelty and I am against the impact of large animal agri on the planet. And so very excited for Brett to share with us how he has found a solution to this, and what he and his business Mzansi Meat are doing, and how he sees the future as well as the investment opportunities of cultivated meat. Thank you, Brett.
Thanks, Roseanne. Thanks very much. Yeah, great to be surrounded by such interesting people with interesting stories while having impact. I think if I look at the company that I started, it started out of 15 years of working in alternative proteins and animal advocacy, and that's where I found myself. And I worked in South Africa predominantly, but spent time in Germany and a bit overseas in the States and in other markets. And I'd worked for a long period of time at looking at how do we get people to look at their diets and look at the food system and ideally change to what I believe, and I think what many on this call would at least acknowledge, that we could probably improve the way that we treat animals at the scale that we find. And the current way of raising and killing 70 billion animals and over 1 trillion marine life in a predominantly intensive way, it's probably not going to be the way that we do it in the future. I think that's probably not a controversial statement anymore. How we get there is probably going to take a bit of time. Well, hopefully not too much time. And so I had spent a number of this time, 10 plus years, predominantly speaking to South Africans, and South Africans, like some other parts of the world, or a lot of parts of the world, are very, very attached to their meat and would never consider eating less meat. Even a meat-free Monday was a hard ask. I think it's obviously sort of different. You're seeing a growing demand in India, but in terms of South Africa, there's always this real strong connection, particularly when it comes to red meat. And so I'd always said, okay, well, the attempts that I took to try and maybe say run campaigns to talk about reduction efforts at a nationwide level were probably not as effective. Talking about the benefits as much as I'd like to from environmental, animal health, etc., and even economic, were ones that people, I think, often say, yes, I buy into this. I'd love to change. But when I go to a friend's house, there's meat on the fire, or my mom makes a great roast, or this and that, and the equivalent, whatever's relevant to your own culture. And so I think people's behaviors weren't able to match the attitudes. And we've seen over the last 50, 60 years that there's been an increased change in attitudes, particularly when it comes to the environment, but now increasingly so, the treatment of what we should be doing with animals. And those numbers that I think Claire mentioned earlier are just pretty startling. And I think everybody wants to protect the environment now. Everybody wants to see wildlife, but they can't get that steak, Roseanne, as you said, off the plate. And so this concept of cultivated meat, and just for everybody, just quickly, we take a small biopsy from a cow, we replicate the conditions outside of the cow, and then at scale in 3 to 4 weeks, we are able to produce a protein from an animal without the need for the animal to be killed. Mzansi Meat is making beef burgers, and we'll make different meats in the future, but for the most part now, that's our focus is. And so I've been talking about this as I guess I can say now, young animal advocates, and when these concepts weren't as well known, and in South Africa. But in South Africa, the mindset is always, okay, well, that's happening somewhere else. And I think this is also the case for a lot of emerging markets. I've got a lot of colleagues and friends from other parts in emerging markets, South America, etc., who have the similar mindset. It's like, it's very difficult to do something here. This happens in the Netherlands, Israel, or what have you. Anyway, so I had a similar attitude, but I was working in an alternative protein and selling plant-based to South Africans. And plant-based meat, as much as I love it, I believe it's got a limiting return on it eventually. I don't think you're going to be able to get the majority of people who are moving into a meat-based diet, or who currently adopt a meat-based diet, to drop plant-based away for something as, to be honest, delicious as red meat and chicken and all these types of things that are just so convenient and available. And so that's, I plant-based I think plays a crucial role in the future. It's going to occupy a lot of our diets, I think, in the future. And I think a lot of people also might move to whole foods and plant-based, but I don't think that's the majority. And after speaking to South Africans for 10 years, I just said, you can't actually take meat away from people, and you have to provide something. It's about abundance opposed to sort of providing scarce, or saying that there's scarcity, and making it better than what is available now. Putting something on a braai or a barbecue that is better than the current sausages and steaks, etc. And that's where I believe cultivated meat has the opportunity to do so. It's a new technology that's only been around for 10 years, well, commercially available for around 10 years. First started by some folks in the Netherlands and the UK, and is now being done by about 25 companies, full stack companies that are doing from trying to produce a product, and there's about 70 odd companies that are up and downstream in the B2B space, working in the different components of cultivated meat. And anyway, so came to spend some time in Germany and saw the rapid adoption, at least of the startup world, looking at cultivated meat as an opportunity, and cellular agriculture by its extension, and spent some time in San Francisco, came back to Cape Town, which is my hometown, and looked at the whole African continent and saw that there wasn't a single company that I knew of commercially working on cultivated meat as late as 2019. And that was an opportunity where I saw companies receiving finances of 60, 80, 100, and now recently $400 million, and no one even knowing about it in South Africa. And I'm sure it's in some of the other places in emerging markets, it's probably the same thing. So the consumer understanding is low, and the acceptance from investors was also very low. And so we had this task of going out to South African investors to get them to understand what cultivated meat is, and going to international investors and saying, take a risk on a biotech company in South Africa. So it's convincing them about South Africa, convincing them about food tech and biotech in Africa. I mean, if you speak to some investors, they don't actually know where to put Africa on a map, but South Africa, they sometimes struggle with. So that was a task that was at hand, and we started this, and we did this in 2020. We started in lockdown, which was a struggle in itself. And anyway, I can maybe touch on some of the things later on, but over the past 2 years, what we've set out to achieve is to be the first to make a cultivated beef burger in South Africa. And we did that a couple of weeks ago. And I haven't eaten meat in 15 years. And about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I ate a beef burger for the very first time. We had a couple other people eat it for the very first time. Interestingly enough, one of the person was actually Hindu, and they ate a beef burger for the first time in their entire life. So it offers a very interesting approach to looking at protein. I think it offers a more an abundant approach, opposed to say, let's take things away. And it's an exciting prospect, particularly, and we're really, really excited to be leading it in Africa. Thanks, Roseanne.
Thank you so much, Brett. Yeah, that's like super exciting. And for all you investors joining us on the call, maybe something you would like to look at is all the opportunities in alt protein and cultivated meat. So I think I'm next going to go to Barati, and then we'll complete with Sunny. We all from Africa continent, and Barati is joining us from Tiger Brands. Also so excited to see a couple of listed companies in South Africa now making investments into the plant-based space. And Barati is the director of a VC fund that has been launched by Tiger Brands, which is a large food company in South Africa. So again, for all us plant-based and vegan enthusiasts, super exciting to see businesses like this venturing into that space. It means we can look forward to more products on the market, maybe some of Brett's burgers down the line. And Barati, so we are happy to have you with us and keen to hear what your fund is aiming to do. What are the visions that you see, and what are you hoping to achieve with your VC fund?
Thanks, Roseanne. Yeah, we're really excited. As you said, we launched the venture capital fund for Tiger Brands last year. So Tiger Brands is Africa's largest food producer, actually. So we're very determined and very deliberate about being a leading voice and being a leading food producer when it comes to working towards a more sustainable food system. And so we acknowledge that there's obviously still a long way to go. And I think the premise of the venture capital fund for us was, in part one, to be a pipeline for inorganic growth for the company, for the wider group, and two, to answer to the ever-changing consumer needs. And so that's our investment thesis is really centered around the consumer trends, the consumer needs that we've seen. And then what we've seen, it was even pre-COVID, but more accelerated coming out of COVID, is that consumers are more conscious about well-being. They're more conscious about health and nutrition. They're very deliberate about what they're consuming from a food as well as beverage perspective. And so our investment thesis really is centered around health and nutrition, which is linked to Tiger Brands' business purpose, which is to nourish and nurture more lives every day. And so coming into the first investment that we made within the plant-based space, what we had observed from a consumer perspective is that, and the reason why we look at trends in particular is because what we've seen is that long-term trends are the ones that become new product categories. And so we've seen that consumers moving to more healthier ways of living, healthier lifestyles, plant-based products, or rather meat alternatives and dairy alternatives, there's been an increasing demand for these. And so that led us to the first investment that we made in a plant-based company. And even though I think Brett and I might see things a little bit differently in terms of the opportunity of plant-based products, what really excites us is in terms of how far the industry has come and what we see as the opportunity going forward. And so we think that there are three things that are quite fundamental to growing plant-based products, particularly looking at South Africa as well as the rest of the African continent. Plant-based products have come a long way in terms of taste. I think there's still a long way to go, and that's something that together with our investee company we're working on. But taste, affordability, and accessibility, we believe are the true levers to unlock further growth within this plant-based segment of the market. Because as Brett rightly said, I don't think the opportunity, whether from an investment or whether from a market growth perspective, really comes in playing niche and staying very niche. And so it really is about how do you transition to more mainstream? How do you transition to people who previously wouldn't have considered plant-based products? And for us, it's really centered around taste, affordability, and accessibility. Taste, as I mentioned, we're working on. Affordability really comes from scale. And I think that our investments, ourselves as Tiger Brands and the other listed companies that have made investments in this space, can go a long way in helping the segment of the market really gain scale. And once they reach significant economies of scale, that's when prices can really start to come down and start being a lot more affordable to a larger segment of the population. Because right now it really is, both from an affordability as well as from a mindset perspective, really currently focused on the higher end of the market. And that's something that we are looking to actively work towards changing.
Thank you so much, Barati. That's super exciting. So also looking forward to tracking your progress. And then finally, introductions to Sunny. Sunny is also a pioneer in Africa. Sunny is quite unique in that they are interested in both, like I would say, softer things like plant-based, vegan lifestyles, and so on. But on the other hand, is also very innovative in the blockchain technology and innovation space. So Sunny is the founder of the Vegan Africa Fund, so also super exciting, and has identified numerous opportunities across the African continent, really seeing Africa as potentially really like a hub for plant-based opportunities, and really opportunity to really broaden the like wealth opportunities for people on the ground. As you also said, Sanjay, we really want to create opportunities for those small scale farmers, small scale producers. And Sunny is really like somebody who is facilitating this. And so very excited for Sunny to share with us the journey of the Vegan Africa Fund, and also to tell us a little bit about the blockchain technology that is associated with this fund. Sunny.
Thank you so much, Roseanne, for that amazing intro. And I also want to thank all of you for being here with me today. This is such an exciting panel to be on. So many inspirations in this space, like Claire from Beyond. And Bharati, what you just said about long-term trends becoming new product categories, I think is huge. And I think that's a great revelation for us to reflect on. And to go into my story a little bit, I grew up in the US, but decided to move to Kenya in 2020, spent a few years traveling around East Africa, and realized that there is a huge opportunity within the vegan product market space. I've spent the past 2 years identifying now over 300 businesses that are African owned, that are creating just alternative proteins, but things like leather alternatives made out of mushroom materials, or eco-friendly packaging made out of sugarcane. And what I've identified as the biggest barriers is machinery and infrastructure. You have hundreds of small businesses that are literally creating everything by hand, creating these amazing products at their local community level. And while they're, feeding and providing these products to the local community, they're also competing with globally imported products, which are really threatening the opportunities for these eco-entrepreneurs to create and sustain generational wealth within their communities and to grow that from the ground up. So the Vegan Africa Fund was actually an initiative that I didn't plan on starting, but in early 2021 in Kenya, I connected with the owners of Kenya's first alternative protein producers, Vegan Basket, and began making my first angel investments, and was able to see incredible growth when they, doubled the size of their kitchen, doubled the size of their, in-house facilities. We saw between 10 and 30% month over month growth in the revenue. We saw that there was a huge influx in interest in eating more healthy, more plant-based, more vegan. And at the same time, all of these different distributors, from grocery stores to small market, wanted these products stocked so they could provide vegan products to their customers. So I saw the product market fit. I really wanted to investigate this more. And now we've identified across 25 countries in Africa hundreds of different businesses that fit this investment criteria, that are leaving animals out of the supply chain, that are really striving towards making veganism accessible and locally sourced. But again, the biggest constraint and the biggest barrier is access to capital to manufacturing. And so in order to marry kind of my two loves in this life, which is veganism, living this cruelty-free lifestyle, and the blockchain space, which I believe is, the next frontier of how we communicate with currency. You know, blockchain does for us now what the ATM and the credit card did for our ability to control our own funds and finances back in the 70s and 80s. And so to, you know, innovatively come together and say, how can we get the world to support vegan startups in Africa? We launched the VAF token, and we launched our very first NFT collections, where an NFT stands for a non-fungible token. It's a unique piece of digital art that's actually a token that's redeemable for a gift basket of sustainably produced vegan items from the network that we invest in. And so we're currently raising our Fund 1 right now. Very excited once we meet our fundraising goals to deploy this into some of the companies that we've been speaking with and, you know, interviewing and building up these relationships with the ultimate goal of making sure we're creating and helping these amazing founders create this generational eco-wealth. And at the same time, you know, for me, coming from a Western perspective, there is a big conversation that is about food security and how can we make sure that we're feeding, you know, the world to come. And that's what I've seen a lot of this concern about when I'm talking to investors in the States or in Canada. And one thing I think we need to reiterate is that animal agriculture is driving food insecurity, where at best, animal agriculture is 20% efficient, meaning every 1,000 calories you put into a cow or to chickens, at best, you'll get 200 calories out to feed humans. And that deficit, those other 800 calories are literally going to waste products, going to carbon emissions, going to deforestation, and degrading the land and cutting off people from being able to consume those calories. And so not only is this something that promotes, you know, well-being for ourselves and our planet, but when you look at the projections for the vegan product markets in the next decade, this is projected to be highly profitable, high growth potential. Africa as a whole has the highest returns on foreign direct investment in the world. And I think my passion right now is helping bridge some of these gaps from the West to drive and funnel funds into this entrepreneurship that's there, that's already creating these products. It just needs the support in order to expand.
Thank you so much, Sunny. So I think we've had such an exciting conversation already. We can see how important food security is. It's important for social equality. It's important for planet sustainability. It's important for human health. It creates investment opportunities. It's just like really remarkable, the momentum in this space. And as we've said, like really, really great to engage with people across the globe on this. And then Claire, also maybe just a question for you. Do you feel that the interest that we're seeing from VIPs in the vegan market, we see so much now on social media from the New York mayor implementing plant-based in schools and celebrities endorsing veganism. Lewis Hamilton, I see, is launching a vegan fast food chain. What role do you see these like very important people playing in really creating a voice for veganism? Sarika, you are on mute.
Yep. Sorry, I just realized. I think it's important that veganism is not seen, or it stops being seen as a kind of hippie, social outcast type thing. Because I think it's important that people feel comfortable to say to their friends, family, whatever, that they are vegan if that's what they've chosen to be. And these influencers, because that's what they are, they're celebrities, but because of their following, they have the potential to influence many people, are important. And I'm very glad that they are putting their time, their weight, their renown into it, but also obviously their money. And interesting, you mentioned Lewis Hamilton, because that chain has been around in London for over a year, as I recall, raised assets. Towards the back end of last year. I think they may have done another asset raise, and actually Leonardo DiCaprio. I know this because people send me messages saying, did you see this?
Okay.
Leonardo DiCaprio has just put money into it. And I'm super happy about that, because one of my companies that I invested in 2019 is making a product which is on sale in that chain of restaurants which he's developing. So you know, I'm applauding from the sidelines as I see it grow. It's certainly the case, you know, people like James Cameron have done a lot in this space. Obviously, the Game Changers film was important. A number of different films which were backed by Hollywood celebrities. Leonardo obviously did the Before the Flood, as I recall. You know, these people are really behind it, insisting sometimes that the Oscars is entirely vegan, and I think the Cannes Film Festival was entirely vegan too. So yeah, it's important that these people are behind it, because it makes it feel more mainstream to people. And you know, and if somebody you know, criticizes you, well, you say, oh, but what's wrong with me being vegan? You know, didn't you know Lewis Hamilton was vegan? Oh, okay. Or Serena Williams, or, you know, who also has put a lot of money into this. So there are people that, you know, they're celebrities, but people also admire them. And it makes veganism almost fashionable, let's say.
Yeah. Okay, and then Brett, maybe then as a vegan, would you maybe tell us what was your experience like of tasting the burger, and how did you feel afterwards?
I'm still here, so that's a good sign. Yeah, I think it was interesting. You know, obviously in the lead up, I was trying different blends and different prototypes and everything until we actually got that final amount. So I was used to it. I think your body does sort of go through some changes if you stay away from animal products for long enough, in terms of your gut or whatever, and what you can process. So I guess there was a thought there, like what would it taste like? When I tasted, I mean, there's something about meat. It's just got more that it hits you with the flavor profile that I as much as I love eating plant-based foods, I remember why I loved eating meat so much 15 years ago, and I think there's sort of is twofold in terms of my thoughts. So I think I don't like to describe myself as an identity, and I think something like cultivated meat messes around with our need to attach to something, because it's providing something that is potentially cruelty-free for completely, and but it's the same thing that we were sort of have kind of at least demonized somewhat, I guess, over the last years, and documentaries, as you've referenced, have been made about it. So I think it sort of will play around with a lot of people. I think there's a lot of other questions that we have to look at, and we get this already: kosher, halal. You know, these interesting topics that I think it is going to help, not just in terms of maybe dietary preferences for ethical reasons, but also from a religious point of view and cultural. So I think there's a lot of things that is a bigger question. I think for me, it was also just amazing that we could do it in South Africa after all the hurdles that we had to jump through. Raising, as Sunny was mentioning, raising funds down, bringing it down south has got its challenges, and I think local, this is not a dig at Tiger Brands VC, but local investors do sort of sometimes are a bit more cautious in South Africa, and they want to see, you know, where it's the Bay Area mindset of throw checks at everything, which is also not so good. So I think there's a lot of, I think showing something tangible for myself and for the team, and then for the media and public and everything, and then ultimately investors, was important. I think showcasing that it tastes delicious. We got somebody who had never eaten a veggie burger to eat a cultivated beef patty, Upsi, who's our head of taste, and she was also like blown away. So I think, yeah, so I think variety of things, just having that thing showcased and tasted delicious was amazing. And I also think that maybe what is the product that we made, as many of the cultivated meat products at the moment, was blended with plant proteins. And I think that's probably a foreseeable future in the next 10, 20 years, that we're going to see, definitely at the mainstream amount, that you're going to have this blend of plant-based and cultivated. For example, you could have cultivated meat, or rather plant-based mince that combines with cultivated fat, for example, that could really help bring out those profiles and those flavors. So I think just this technology, and it just opens up so many more questions and so many new avenues that we can look at from a food perspective. And you know, when I bit into it, I don't want to say it's as cheesy as it sounds, but even though it's not vegan, I did feel like I tasted a bit of the future. So yeah.
Great, thank you so much, Brett. We do have a couple of questions, so should we move to that, and then we'll see if we have a bit more time to close off. So thank you, Gayatri. Are you going to handle those for us? Or would you like me to read them out?
You can go ahead, Roseanne, please.
Thank you so much. So there's apologies. Somebody said that a question was tagged incorrectly to somebody's name. So apologies if I get this wrong. And there's a question that is very investment focused. So Claire, perhaps you can help us out with this one. It's showing to be from Anand, and Anand is quite keen to find out if we have an opinion on the green or the ESG bond market. So I don't know if you have any experience with the green bonds, Claire, if you'd like to comment on that, maybe.
Not too much. I've certainly looked into it with respect to a particular area which I would really love to see get off the ground, and that is actually the concept of transitioning farmers away from animal agriculture into crop farming or horticulture or some other use of their land which is not using animals. So I researched it quite a bit and have talked to somebody that has issued green bonds. Most of the green bonds are oriented around energy efficiency type projects, either renewables projects or energy efficiency. So a particular system is made more energy efficient, and so there's also a kind of carbon credit benefit, you know, in addition to the efficiency gains of the cheaper energy or whatever. And they're particularly good for sort of green bonds because obviously they're long-term projects. This wouldn't necessarily be so much the case for agriculture, although obviously, you know, provided you're growing something which has a demand and you can project forward that demand is not going to reduce over time, I think you could build in enough security. I see that being probably more of a blended finance project as product as well. I see that for this, it's not as I won't say riskless, but low risk as a you know a product in the kind of energy or electricity space where you've got these long-term contracts, and so you would need possibly to have some kind of philanthropic capital taking first loss. But that's something which I do feel has some potential in this space, and once I've got all of the index funds launched and have fully invested the VC fund that I'm currently, you know, I'm investing at the moment and you know, bringing in capital for, then I would be perfectly happy to divert my attention towards this, because I think that can actually, this is one way that it can be adapted towards you know, a safer food system and provide a different style of investment for those people that, you know, are concerned about preservation of capital and yield as opposed to growth, which is obviously what VC is all about.
Thank you. And Sanjay, do you perhaps have anything to add to that, your point of view?
Not really. In fact, we have a separate vertical that looks at green bonds. But what I understand is, as Claire was saying, to be in green bonds in the agricultural space, we need to look at large-scale projects which are primarily into afforestation. What we see is afforestation projects. Typically, these green bonds are typically supported by developmental organizations, multinational donors, so that they can be blended and the you know token rate can come down. And for it to convert to, so typically from an India agriculture perspective, our perspective is focused on the small and marginal farmers. So if we look at what green bonds can do for small and marginal farmers, it probably could be areas where climate resilience can be built in, especially for the Himalayan regions, the flood-prone, Gangetic regions. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then Brett, here's a question I think that you can answer. It's, are bugs safe to eat? And I know you have some experience with bugs in ice cream, so perhaps your view on eating of bugs.
Quick view. I worked alongside and still do work alongside in our we have a co-working space with people that work with insects to make feed for livestock, be pet food, and then they're attempted to make it for people as a milk that was used in ice cream. I think in terms of safety, I mean, there's many examples around the world where people currently eat bugs, and there's a high level of nutrition with it, and they seem to do pretty fine. In terms of our modern lives, I just think consumer acceptance is probably, you're not going to change that. And I'd also think, we'll probably find out that the interesting lives of bugs become more interesting as we learn more about animals, and we'll probably want to move away from eating them as well. So yeah, I think insect-based is something that's definitely doing well from an investment point of view. Is it something that I'd probably jump behind? Probably not. And yeah, I'd be curious about if anybody else has other thoughts on that.
Sunny and Bharati, maybe some thoughts from your side. Any contact or interest that you've come across on bugs?
Not really interest on my side. Sorry, Claire. Sorry, Roseanne. But I think what Brett touched on was quite important in terms of consumer acceptance. I think it's the same whether it's insects, whether it's plant-based, whether it's cultivated meats. I think at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is we're trying to almost migrate or I wouldn't say migrate, I'd say integrate into consumers' current lives. And so it's always I always get the question on education for consumers around plant-based products. And I think from our perspective, the solution is not to change consumers' mindsets, because that's always a difficult thing to do. And Brett touches on this quite a lot, but it's if you are available when they need you and you are affordable than what they currently, either at parity or even more affordable, less expensive than what they currently purchase. And if you are tastier, then you're good to go, regardless of the fact that you are animal protein or you are a plant-based protein. And I think that for us is really central in everything that we do, and that you've just got to make the right type of products. And so trying to convince consumers is so much of a much more difficult task, and it doesn't get you the scale. Whether it is your objective is to grow a market, whether your objective is to make the food system more sustainable, all of those need scale. And so the best way to do that is to try and integrate into what consumers are currently doing, what their current behaviors are, or where their behaviors are moving to, and make yourself as a company or as a product accessible, make it tasty, and most importantly, affordable. And that's very important for us in South Africa, because the majority of 60% of our consumers are actually on the base of the pyramid. And these are consumers in the South African landscape that are very reliant on government grants for living. These are very small government grants, and they rely on them so much that your product really just needs to be affordable and tasty. And so that the choice for the consumer is at the shelf, in the fridge, in the freezer, and that's what we're really focusing on. And so I know that's a long-winded answer to the insect question, but I think whether it's insects, whether it's plant-based, whether it's cultivated meat, at the end of the day, the consumers are the ones that are making the choice. And if you integrate yourself and you're more accessible and affordable to them, then you're going to win.
Thank you so much. That's a very good answer. Thank you, Bharati. We have a final question, which I'm wondering if Gayatri maybe has some insights. The question seems to come from Anand, who's keen to find out whether we have any insights into country level plans to comply with the Paris Agreement, and also potentially of ways to monitor country level compliance with UN SDGs and so on. So Gayatri, I don't know if you have a view on how different countries are progressing towards complying with these agreements?
Yeah, so actually we had taken up this question in the previous panel as well, and we have answered that in much length. So I don't think there is a need to repeat that response. But that's a very important and pertinent question with respect to both the panels, because we are talking about such an important issue, which is critical to the future of humanity on this planet. And we need to have it aligned with the national priorities. And NDCs, as they call it, nationally determined contributions, are the set of goals that the country defines to be prioritized over other things. And that's pretty much related to development. And one of you were talking, I think Claire was talking about the carbon markets, and that is one way to actually integrate all of it together. And using a systems thinking approach, we can actually connect all the pieces together and see how we can address these problems in an integrated manner by having these goals at a national level. So we did answer that question. So I think we are good to go. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, I think that's all then from this panel. It was like an absolute pleasure to spend some time with you, and I hope that we have initiated some interests with you all in the food system, opportunities, and maybe a consideration also for the lives of the non-human species that we share the planet with, and look forward to the journey with all of you guys towards a better planet. Thank you. And thanks again, Gayatri, Bazan Earth, CFA Institute, and thank you so much to the panelists, not only for joining us today, but for each of you for the impact that you are having. Really noted and appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Razan.
Thank you, Razan. Thank you, all the panelists. It was really wonderful listening to your perspectives. Specifically, this panel, I mean, you are again bringing in some diverse geographical, insights also, which is very important to hear. Like Bharati was mentioning how it is important to address the problems at the bottom of the pyramid. So this is truly an enriching panel. Thank you so much for your time and all the wonderful work that you are doing. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Roseanne. You did a wonderful job. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.